I had this article from CNN that they put on their website about 3 hours ago, a little after 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And the headline was, "What happens if the U.S. misses its deadline to reunite families?" Well, that's exactly what happened. Anyway, the piece of CNN said that when the federal judge who handled this, Dana Sabra, gave orders to reunite families by certain dates, he made his demands clear. He said these were not aspirational goals, they were firm deadlines. Now, I don't know what enforcement power or punitive power a court has when they make an order like this. But anyway, that was weeks ago. So here we are today, and some officials were scrambling to reunite hundreds of parents and children by the end of the day. But these bastards don't know where the kids are. They have no fucking idea. I mean, if there is a worse episode in Trump's filthy presidency, I don't know what it could be. Mike Pence is going to rot in a foul sub-basement of his own hell for what he's done. Every single thing that his so-called Messiah told him to do included never, ever, 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 ever turning away people, strangers who come to a strange land looking for solace and comfort. But Pence is no more of a Christian than I'm a fucking iceberg, and we know this. Pence and the rest of these phony evangelical pricks are vicious religious fascists. But to do this to children, how fucking, I mean, outrageous. I can't think of a word to describe this. But the question CNN raised was, what's going to happen if the deadline is missed? Well, the short answer, CNN answered its own question when they put this up at 6 o'clock this evening. They said, no one really knows what would happen. The ACLU has not requested a specific punishment if officials miss the deadline. You know, how about whoever's responsible for coming up with this, and there is one person, I'll get to him later too, maybe the punishment for the people who are responsible for this, for coming up with this idea and then acting on it, maybe they should have their children taken away from them. Oh, I know. Take their children away, ship them to fucking New York or Toronto or Brazil someplace, right? And then when these filthy, rotten white people want their kids back, we can say, oh, darn, well, guess what? Ooh, this is awful. I don't know where your kid is. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Isn't that what these filthy goddamn fascist Christians really believe? They say fuck you to their own Savior, their own Redeemer, their own Messiah, and they revert back to a religion that's none of their goddamn business. Judaism. And when that religion was established, I'm not cutting anybody slack here because I think all religion is bullshit. But let's be real. It was a dog-eat-dog world. Desert tribes slashing each other to pieces, fighting for, I don't know what, territory, cities, burning shit to the ground, killing up everybody that lived there. And it wasn't just the Hebrews. They were all doing it. So the idea of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Okay, let's revert to that, and let's round up some of these ICE people, and let's snatch their children away from them and send them to some mystery place. And then we'll lose track of them because we're not going to keep any records. Dirty bastards. The ACLU hasn't requested a punishment. The ACLU is the organization suing the government on behalf of some families who had their children ripped away from them at the border. And the judge hasn't mentioned any specific consequences either. The deadline, by the way, was 6 o'clock Eastern Time this evening. CNN says, well, but we can look at what happened earlier for clues about what might happen. July 10th was the deadline for the Trump administration to reunite all families with children under 5 years old who were eligible for reunification. Families that were eligible for reunification? Are you fucking kidding me? Are we to believe, and yes, we better believe it, that there were certain rules that said, well, if you don't meet the criteria here, these rules, then you are not eligible to get your child back. What the fuck is that? So for parents that were facing deportation, they had a choice. Leave the kids behind. Trump administration missed that July 10th deadline, failed to reunite the eligible families with children under 5. How can you be ineligible for reunification with your 4-year-old child that was taken from you by the fucking rotten U.S. government, Trump government? How can that be? What are the criteria for having your child back? God damn.
What happens to those 463 kids that their parents have been deported? What happens now?
Yeah, it's 460 parents, so it could be even more kids.
Right.
There's a very good chance they're going to be permanently separated.
And
Look,
then
you're
what?
seeing how hard...
Just so that I understand, then they go into the foster care system in the U.S.?
Yes, they go into the foster care system in the U.S. If they have a relative in the U.S., there's a chance that that relative will be appointed their legal guardian. But many of the other kids are going to actually go in the foster care system and could become wards of the state, could be subject to adoption. There's a very high likelihood a lot of these parents, are never going to see their kids again. And a lot of these kids are actually going to stay in the U.S.
I mean, I just want to pause right there, that these parents might never see their children again and their children may be put up for adoption. Did these parents know that when they came to the United States? Is that a risk that you think they knowingly took coming to the U.S. seeking asylum or for whatever reason they came?
No, it certainly wasn't, because prior to this, prior to about 2 months ago, the policy has always been to keep families together. And so I'm quite confident that these families thought that there was very little risk that they were going to actually be separated from their children. They thought there was a risk for sure that they were going to be deported back to their home country, but they were going to be deported back as a family unit. The idea that they could be separated permanently from their children, I don't think ever crossed their minds.
At the time of that missed deadline, July 10th, the judge in this, Sabraw, said the ACLU would be able to suggest any consequence it deemed appropriate. But the ACLU didn't ask for punishment, and the judge seemed mostly satisfied with the government's efforts to meet the July 10th deadline, even though they missed it by a fucking country mile. 2 days later, the Trump monsters said it had finished reuniting 58 families with children under 5. Well, 58, there were 2,500 families ripped to pieces by these sons of bitches in our fascist government. And those were the families who were at the heart of today's deadline.